Daniel Reed watched the security feed with growing confusion. Another drop-off was happening right now in Bay 7. The third one this month alone. He leaned closer to the monitor as a sleek vessel materialized from cloak, deposited a container at the airlock, then vanished before Station Harmony's sensors could get a proper reading. The same pattern as always. Inside the container would be another hatchling. Probably Scaran, based on the ship's design. That made 15 Scaran young currently in the facility. 15 children from a species known across 3 spiral arms for their absolute, violent devotion to protecting their offspring. Scarans had once glassed an entire moon because a survey team accidentally flew too close to a nesting site. They killed first and never bothered asking questions. Yet here they were, dropping their babies at a human-run station like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Director Yoon appeared beside him, her reflection ghosting across the monitor. Another one, Scaran vessel. Base 7. Daniel pulled up the intake records. That's the 5th species this week. We've got Vrals, Drachners, Kelthins, and now more Scarans. The nursery's at capacity. Then we expand again. Yoon crossed her arms. What's bothering you, Daniel? We've been doing this for 6 months now. You should be used to it. That's exactly what bothers me. He gestured at the screen where the container sat waiting for retrieval. These species would die fighting before letting strangers near their young. Scarans literally have a word in their language that translates to death before dishonor of failed protection. Their entire culture revolves around keeping their children safe from every possible threat. And they trust us to do exactly that. Why, though? Daniel stood and paced the small observation room. What do they see in us that makes them override millions of years of evolutionary paranoia? We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest. We don't have the best technology or the most impressive military. So why do the galaxy's apex predators keep handing us their most vulnerable? Ian pulled up a galactic map on the adjacent screen. Red dots mark facilities across dozens of systems. It started small. 5 years ago, a dying Vrail mother left her cubs at a human medical station. The doctors didn't know what else to do, so they cared for them until the father could be located. He came expecting the worst and found his cubs healthy, well-fed, and completely content. One incident doesn't explain this. Daniel pointed at the constellation of red dots. 47 facilities now. Every single one run by humans. Every single one filled with predator species, young whose parents should theoretically tear us apart for even looking at their children wrong. The Vrail father told others. Word spread. Yoon shrugged. Predators talk to other predators, apparently. About what, though? What's the message? Daniel pulled up footage from the nursery. On screen, a Scaran hatchling slept curled against a Vrail cub while a human caretaker monitored their vital signs. These species are natural enemies. In the wild, they kill each other on sight. Yet here they are, sleeping together, and the parents allow it. More than allow it. They specifically request it. His communicator blinked. Base 7's container was ready for retrieval. Daniel headed for the door, still puzzling through the contradiction. Yoon followed him through the corridors of Station Harmony. Around them, the facility hummed with activity. Human staff moved between nurseries while automated systems maintained precise environmental controls for a dozen different species requirements. Base 7's airlock cycled open. The container was standard design, temperature-controlled and cushioned. Daniel keyed in the release code, and the lid hissed open. Inside, wrapped in thermal blankets, a tiny Scaran hatchling blinked up at him with enormous golden eyes. The scales were still soft, barely darkened from their birth color. Maybe 3 weeks old. The hatchling made a sound somewhere between a chirp and a growl. Confused. Scared. Looking for parents who weren't there. Daniel's training kicked in. He'd spent years working with Earth wildlife before joining the xenobiology program. Orphan wolf cubs, bear cubs, even a mountain lion kitten once. The principles remained the same across species. Move slowly. Keep your voice calm. Let them know they're safe. He reached in carefully and lifted the hatchling out. It weighed maybe 5 pounds, all thin limbs and oversized head. The golden eyes tracked his movements, but the hatchling didn't struggle. Just watched. Waited. "Hey there, little one." Daniel cradled it against his chest, supporting the head. "I know you're scared. I know this isn't where you're supposed to be, but you're safe here. I promise." The hatchling scales were warm against his skin. Its breathing gradually slowed from panicked to merely anxious. One small clawed hand gripped his shirt. Yun watched from the doorway. "You're good at this. I grew up rehabilitating orphaned animals." Daniel checked the hatchling's physical condition as he spoke. Eyes clear, no signs of malnutrition or injury. "My parents ran a wildlife sanctuary in Colorado. You learn to read what an animal needs, even when it can't tell you. These aren't animals. No, but the young ones still need the same basic things. Food, warmth, safety, and someone who gives a damn whether they live or die." He headed toward the nursery. The language might be different, but the fundamentals don't change. The nursery occupied the entire central ring of Station Harmony. Divided into climate-controlled zones, it currently housed 63 younglings from 19 different species. Human staff moved between them with practiced efficiency. Some fed infants, others played with toddlers, a few monitored medical equipment. Daniel carried the new hatchling to the Scaran section. Immediately, the other Scaran young perked up. They crowded around, chirping and clicking. The new arrival responded hesitantly, still scared but recognizing its own kind. "They always do this," one of the human caretakers said. Her name was Amy, former pediatric nurse from Luna Colony. The established ones welcomed the newcomers. Like they're saying, "We were scared too, but it's okay here." Daniel set the hatchling down in the heated sand pit. The others surrounded it, not threatening, just investigating. Within minutes, the new arrival was playing tentatively with a slightly older hatchling, batting at a rolling ball that he moved to the observation window. From here, he could see into multiple species areas. The Vrals rough-housed in their section. The Drachners practiced their hunting instincts on mechanical prey. The Kelthans groomed each other in a pile of soft nesting material. All species that would kill each other in the wild. All peaceful here under human supervision. That evening, Daniel couldn't sleep. He returned to the observation room and pulled up the security archives. Hours of footage, hundreds of drop-offs. He watched them all in fast-forward, looking for patterns. The ships always cloaked. The containers always carefully prepared. But something else caught his attention. If he enhanced the footage and ran it through analysis, he could sometimes catch glimpses of the ships lingering nearby after drop-off. Staying cloaked, but definitely present. They weren't abandoning their young. They were watching, observing the facility, studying the humans. Daniel zoomed in on one particular recording from 3 months back. A Scaran vessel had stayed in position for 6 hours after depositing a hatchling. The angle was such that its sensors would have perfect view into the nursery. They'd been watching Daniel work with not just the Scaran young, but others too. Watching him feed a Vrail cub. Watching him treat a Drachner's minor injury. Watching him rock a fussy Kelthan to sleep. The ship had left only after Daniel finished his shift and handed care over to the night staff. "They're testing us," he said aloud to the empty room. But for what? The pattern became clearer over the following weeks. Daniel spent every spare moment reviewing records, cross-referencing drop-off times with nursery activities, building a timeline that nobody else seemed interested in examining. Everyone just accepted the situation. Predators brought their young. Humans cared for them. Why question success? But Daniel needed to understand. He pulled Director Yoon into his office 3 weeks after the latest Scaran arrival. "I want to know how this started. The real story, not the short version." He spread printouts across his desk. "You said a dying Vrail mother 5 years ago. I need details." Yoon settled into the chair across from him. Her name was Kreshta. Trading vessel attacked by pirates near the outer markers. The ship was dying, life support failing. She managed to get her cubs into an escape pod and aimed it at the nearest registered facility. That happened to be Medical Station Kepler, human run. What did the staff do? Panicked mostly. Yoon smiled at the memory. They had no xenopediatric training. Vrals weren't even classified as sentient back then, just dangerous wildlife. But the cubs were dying from exposure and malnutrition. So the doctors did what doctors do. They researched, improvised, and kept them alive. Daniel leaned forward. "How long before the father arrived?" 3 weeks. Long enough for the cubs to recover fully. Long enough for them to bond with the human staff. Yun pulled up an image on her tablet. It showed 2 Vrail cubs barely bigger than house cats, curled up with a human doctor in a hospital bed. This is Dr. Park. She worked 16-hour shifts hand-feeding those cubs because they wouldn't eat otherwise. And when the father showed up, he brought a battle fleet. 20 ships, weapons charged. Demanded his cubs immediately. Yun swiped to the next image. This is him seeing them for the first time after 3 weeks. The photograph showed a massive Vrail warrior, easily 8 feet tall, covered in scarred plates, and carrying enough weapons to arm a squad. He was on his knees. The cubs were climbing over him, chittering happily, clearly healthy and completely unafraid. In the background, Dr. Park watched with obvious relief. He didn't say anything for 10 minutes. Yoon continued. Just held his cubs while they told him everything in their language. Then he stood up, walked over to Dr. Park, and asked her one question. Why? What did she say? She said they needed help and I could help them. What else would I do? Yoon set the tablet down. He left with his cubs. We thought that was the end. 2 months later, he came back, brought his sister's cubs. She'd been injured in combat and needed time to heal. Asked if we would care for them temporarily. Daniel sat back, and she trusted us because he told her what happened. Exactly. Those cubs went home healthy. The sister told others. Within 6 months, we had 5 different Vrail families requesting temporary care during crisis situations. Within a year, other predator species started asking questions. They talked to each other. Predators form their own networks, apparently. They don't share territory, but they share information about threats and resources. Yoon stood and walked to the window overlooking the nursery. To them, we became a resource. The only species they could trust with their most vulnerable. Daniel joined her at the window. Below, the afternoon shift change was happening. Human caretakers briefed each other on individual younglings' needs. Which Scarin was teething and needed frozen treats. Which Vrail had been fussy during nap time. Which Drakner was making excellent progress with socialization. But why only humans? He asked. There are thousands of spacefaring species. Many more advanced than us. Better equipped. I've been asking myself that for 5 years. Yoon pointed at a scene below where a human was mediating a dispute between a Scarin hatchling and a Kelthin youngling over a toy. Watch what happens. The human didn't immediately intervene. She observed for a moment as the 2 younglings postured and growled at each other. When it became clear they couldn't resolve it themselves, she stepped in, took the toy, showed them there were 3 identical toys in the bin, gave them each one, and put the disputed toy aside. Problem solved. Both younglings went back to playing. Simple, Daniel said. Exactly. No grand speeches. No forcing one to submit to the other. No peaking favorites. Just a practical solution that respected both of their needs. Yoon turned to face him. That's what the predators see in us. Every other species in a galaxy approaches childcare from a hierarchy perspective. There's always a ranking, always a preferred group, always politics. And humans? We just care. We don't care if the Scarin hatchling is from a warrior bloodline or a merchant family. We don't care if the Vrail cub's father is a fleet commander or a freight hauler. They're all just kids who need food, safety, and attention. You pulled up another file. I have testimonials from 43 predator species. You know what they all say? Some variation of "you treat our young as your own." Daniel thought about his childhood in Colorado. The wildlife sanctuary where every injured animal got the same level of care, whether it was a common raccoon or an endangered wolf. His mother always said the same thing. They're all somebody's baby. We're not special, he said quietly. We just never learned to see children as anything other than children. That's exactly what makes us special to them. You can close the file. Most predator species raise their young in total isolation, hidden from potential threats, trusting no one outside immediate family. It works for survival, but it creates paranoia and limits community bonds. So they're using us to break that cycle. More than that, Yoon pulled up the statistics. Younglings raised here show 40% better socialization scores than those raised traditionally. They're more adaptable, less aggressive, better at conflict resolution. The predator species are starting to notice. Some are keeping their young here longer than necessary, not because they need to, but because they want their children to have this experience. A commotion below drew their attention. A new arrival was being processed. Daniel recognized the ship design from the security feed. Drachner. But something was different. The parent was coming inside. They rushed down to the intake bay. A massive Drachner female stood in the airlock, her scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles. She held her youngling carefully, her clawed hands surprisingly gentle. When she saw Daniel, she made a rumbling sound. The translator rendered it. "You are the one called Daniel Reed." "I am." He approached slowly, respectfully. Drachners were notoriously territorial. "I have watched you. 3 times I have brought my younglings here. 3 times I have observed from my ship how you care for them, how you care for all of them." She looked down at the youngling in her arms. "This is my youngest, my last. I need to hunt in the deep sectors for 6 months. In my culture, I would leave her with her eldest sibling. But I choose to leave her with you. We'll take good care of her." "I know." The Drachner female stepped closer. "That is why I come inside this time. I need to understand what you do that makes my younglings happy to stay, that makes them eager to return. What magic is this?" Daniel took the youngling carefully. She was small for a Drachner, maybe 4 months old, already showing the sharp intelligence the species was known for. "No magic. We just pay attention. We learn what each individual needs and try to provide it. We make them feel safe. My eldest says you sing to them. Sometimes, if they can't sleep." Drachners do not sing. "Maybe they should." Daniel smiled. "Your daughter here loved it last time. Fell right asleep to an old earth lullaby." The Drachner female made a sound the translator couldn't parse, but her body language showed something like wonder. She reached out and gently touched her daughter's head, then stepped back. "I will return in 6 months. Teach her well, Daniel Reed. Teach her that the galaxy is not only hunting and survival. Teach her what I cannot." Then she was gone, back to her ship, leaving her most precious thing in human hands. Daniel looked down at the youngling who gazed up at him with bright, curious eyes. In the background, Yoon was already arranging the nursery assignment. The trust these species showed was heavy. But Daniel understood it now. They weren't leaving their young because they couldn't protect them. They were leaving them to learn something more important than protection. They were leaving them to learn how to live in a galaxy bigger than tooth and claw. The alarm started at 0400 station time. Daniel jerked awake in his quarters as red emergency lights flooded the room. His communicator was already screaming priority alerts before his feet hit the floor. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching. Military configuration." This is not a drill. He dressed in 30 seconds and ran for the command center. The corridors were chaos. Staff rushing to secure the younglings. Automated systems sealing nursery sections. Everyone moving with practiced efficiency despite the fear. The command center was crowded. Director Yoon stood at the main display, her face pale. On screen, 20 warships hung in space outside the station. Scaran configuration. Weapons systems active. They decloaked right on top of the station's position, which should have been impossible. Have they made contact? Daniel pushed through to Yoon's side. One message. They want to speak with whoever's in charge of youngling care. They specifically asked for you by name. She looked at him. "Daniel, those are battle cruisers. Each one carries enough firepower to crack this station like an egg. Have they made any aggressive moves?" "No. They're just sitting there, waiting." Daniel studied the formation. Classic Scaran battle spacing. Every angle covered. No approach vectors left undefended. But the weapons weren't locked on the station. They were facing outward, like the fleet was taking a defensive position. "Let me talk to them." That's insane. You're not trained for first contact situations with hostile forces. They're not acting hostile. They're acting protective. Daniel pointed at the screen. "Look at the formation. They're guarding us, not threatening us." Before Yoon could argue, the communication panel lit up. Incoming hail. She accepted it. The face that appeared was pure predator. Obsidian scales, eyes that glowed like molten gold, teeth that could bite through steel. Captain Rithal of the Scaran warrior fleet. His image filled the screen, with barely contained violence. Iam Rital. I would speak with Daniel Reed. I'm here. Daniel stepped forward. His heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. How can I help you, Captain? You will show me where you keep our young. Now, not a request. A command backed by overwhelming force. Around the command center, security personnel tensed. Yin opened her mouth to protest, but Daniel cut her off. Of course. Call me aboard. Bay 3 is large enough for a shuttle. I will bring my warriors. Bring whoever you need. But Captain, the younglings are sleeping right now. I'd appreciate if we could keep things quiet. They get cranky when their schedule is disrupted. For a long moment, Rithal stared at him. Then the communication cut off. Are you out of your mind? You can grab his arm. You just invited a Scaran war party onto our station. They have 20 battle cruisers. If they wanted to come aboard, they'd come aboard whether we invited them or not. Daniel headed for Bay 3. This way, we at least maintained some control over the situation. The shuttle arrived 15 minutes later. Daniel stood in the receiving area alone. Yun had wanted to send security, but he refused. Show fear and predators respond to it. Show calm, and sometimes they mirror it. The airlock cycled. 6 Scaran warriors emerged. Each one was over 7 feet of muscle, scale, and controlled lethality. They moved like liquid death, every step calculated. Captain Rithal led them, his golden eyes sweeping the bay for threats. Captain Rithal, welcome to Station Harmony. Daniel didn't bow or show submission. He'd learned that with Earth predators. Respect without fear. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to the nursery. Rithal moved closer. Close enough that Daniel could feel the heat radiating from his scales. Close enough to strike. You are very calm for one facing certain death. Am I facing death? That depends on what I find. Then let's go look. Daniel turned his back on them and walked toward the corridor. A calculated risk. Predators respected confidence, or they killed it. He heard heavy footsteps following and allowed himself a small breath of relief. The walk to the nursery took 10 minutes. The Scaran warriors examined everything, checking structural integrity, noting security measures, evaluating threat vectors. They moved through the station like they were planning an assault or planning a defense to the nursery entrance. Daniel keyed in his access code. Fair warning, it's nap time. We keep the lights low and the temperature warm. Your people specifically requested these environmental conditions. The doors slid open. Soft lighting illuminated the Scaran section. 15 hatchlings slept in carefully arranged sand pits, heated to exact specifications. Some curled alone, others piled together. All peaceful, Rithal froze in the doorway. His warriors fanned out behind him, weapons still holstered but hands ready. They stared at the sleeping hatchlings like they were seeing something impossible. Daniel walked quietly between the sand pits, checking on each youngling with practiced ease. One hatchling stirred, and he paused to adjust its blanket. Another made a small distressed sound, and he hummed quietly until it settled. All routine. This is Tar. He gestured to a slightly larger hatchling sleeping alone in a corner pit. First one your people brought us. 6 months ago. He was terrified at first. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't interact. Just hid in the corner and trembled. And now he's teaching the younger ones how to hunt play. He's gentle with them, even though his instincts say to dominate. He's learning pack behavior instead of solo survival. Daniel moved to the adjacent section. Want to see something interesting? He led them to the viewing window between sections. On the other side, a Vrail cub slept curled against the glass. On the Scaran side, Tar had moved his sleeping position to mirror it. They slept back to back through the transparent barrier. That Vrail is named Shek. His father brought him here 4 months ago. First week, Tar tried to attack him through the glass. Natural enemy response. But they could see each other all the time. Started watching each other. We supervised their first face-to-face meeting last month. They should have killed each other. They played instead. Rough, yes. A few minor scratches that we treated. But they figured out rules. Boundaries. They're friends now. Every nap time, they sleep like this. One of the warriors made a sound deep in his chest. Rithal silenced him with a gesture. Show me everything. I would see all that you do here. For the next 3 hours, Daniel gave them a complete tour. Every species section, every care protocol, every feeding schedule and medical record. The Scaran warriors observed everything with absolute focus. They watched human caretakers work with younglings from a dozen species, feeding them, playing with them, settling disputes, teaching basic skills that in the common play area. A situation developed. A Scaran hatchling and a Drachner youngling both grabbed the same toy. They postured at each other, growls rising. The human supervisor watched, but didn't immediately intervene. Your people do nothing. Rital danced. Watch. The two younglings circle each other. The Scaran was bigger, but the Drachner was quicker. They could hurt each other if it escalated. But the human had positioned herself to intervene if needed while giving them space to resolve it themselves. The Drachner made the first move, pushed the toy toward the Scaran, then pointed at a different toy nearby, offering a trade. The Scaran considered, then accepted. Each took their toy and went separate ways. Problem solved. Your people teach them to negotiate instead of fight. Rithal's voice was strange. To resolve conflict without bloodshed. We teach them to try that first. Fighting is always an option, but it doesn't have to be the only option. Daniel picked up a youngling who'd wandered over. Drachner. She chirped happily and grabbed his shirt. In human culture, we have a saying. It takes a village to raise a child. It means childcare is a community effort. Everyone helps. Everyone contributes. The children belong to all of us, not just their biological parents. This is weakness. Dilution of bloodline importance. Is it? Daniel gestured around the nursery. Every youngling here will return to their parents stronger, healthier, and more adaptable than if they'd been raised in isolation. They'll know how to interact with other species, how to build alliances, how to find peaceful solutions before resorting to violence. That's not weakness. That's survival. Rithal was silent for a long time. He watched a human caretaker sing softly to a fussy Scaran hatchling, watched the hatchling calm and eventually fall asleep, watched the human carefully place it in its sand pit and check its temperature before moving to tend to a Vrail cub. You care for them as if they were your own young. They are. While they're here, they're ours to protect. Daniel met his eyes. Every species that brings their children here understands that. We don't replace their parents. We're just the ones who keep them safe until their parents can return. Why? The question hung in the air. Daniel thought about all the answers he could give. About human evolution and cooperative childcare. About game theory and building alliances. About cultural values and moral philosophy. But the truth was simpler than that. Because they're children, and because we can. Rithal stared at him for a long moment, then turned to his warriors. We leave. Now. They filed out in silence. Daniel followed them back to Bay 3, still carrying the Drachner youngling who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. At the airlock, Rithal paused. You have answered many questions, Daniel Reed, but you have raised many more. Will you attack us? No. The Scaran captain looked at the sleeping youngling. But we will watch. We will observe. And we will learn what you are teaching our young. You're welcome to visit anytime. The parents usually do. I'm not a parent. Rithal boarded his shuttle. I'm a warrior. But perhaps that is why I needed to see this most of all. The fleet departed an hour later. Station Harmony slowly returned to normal operations. Daniel stood in the observation deck, watching the warships jump to faster than light, wondering what exactly had just happened. 3 days later, 6 more Scaran hatchlings arrived. And this time, the parents stayed to watch. The distress call came during morning feeding. Daniel was helping a Scaran hatchling learn to use utensils when a station-wide broadcast interrupted everything. Emergency bulletin. Hostage situation on Freehaven Colony. Korvax syndicate raiders have seized a civilian shelter. Casualties reported. All vessels in range are advised to avoid the sector. Daniel's blood went cold. Freehaven was primarily a human colony, but it housed families from dozens of species. He pulled up the news feed on his datapad. The reports were fragmentary, but clear enough. Pirates had hit the colony's main settlement. When security responded, they'd grabbed civilians and barricaded themselves in a school building. Among the hostages were children, multiple species. including humans. Around the nursery, the human staff listened to the updates with growing horror. The Galactic Council was convening. Negotiators were being dispatched. Standard protocols were being followed. Everything moved with bureaucratic slowness while children sat in danger. The council will handle it, Director Yun said, but her voice lacked conviction. They have procedures for these situations. How long do the procedures take? Days, sometimes weeks. They have to build consensus among member species, coordinate military assets, ensure proper jurisdiction. Daniel watched the news feed. The pirates had already killed 2 hostages to prove their seriousness. They were demanding a fortune in credits and safe passage out of council space. The debate raged about whether to negotiate or use force. Politics and procedure. While children were terrified and bleeding, he went back to his duties because there was nothing else he could do. Fed the younglings. Changed the ones who needed it. Supervised playtime. All routine, while his mind screamed that somewhere children needed help, and the galaxy's response was to form committees. 4 hours later, everything changed. The first ship to arrive at Freehaven was Scarin, then Vrail, then Drakner. Within an hour, 15 predator species fleets had converged on the colony. No council authorization, no diplomatic protocols, no warning to the pirates. They simply acted. Daniel watched it happen on the news feeds. The coordinated assault lasted 17 minutes. Scaran warriors breached from above. Vrals tunneled in from below. Drakners hacked the security systems. Every predator species contributed their unique capabilities to a single purpose. The pirates didn't stand a chance. Every hostage extracted alive. Every pirate dead. The raider base on the edge of the system destroyed so thoroughly that debris would scatter for years. Not a single predator casualty. It was the most efficient military operation the galaxy had seen in decades, and it was completely illegal by council law. The galactic news networks erupted. Representatives from dozens of species condemned the unauthorized action. The council called emergency sessions. Accusations of vigilante justice and violation of territorial sovereignty flew. The predator species ambassadors were summoned to explain themselves. Every single one gave the same answer. Ask the humans. That's when Daniel's communicator started receiving calls from government officials, news organizations, and council representatives. They all wanted to know what the humans had done to convince natural enemies to cooperate in military action. What influence were humans exerting over the predator species? What political game was being played? Director Yun took most of the calls while Daniel tried to process what had happened. He was sitting in the observation room, watching Scaran hatchlings play with Vrail cubs, when his screen lit up with an incoming priority message. Encrypted. Scaran military codes that he accepted it. Captain Rithal's face appeared. Daniel read. I assume you have seen the news. I have. What happened? We learned. Rithal's expression was difficult to read. We watched you care for vulnerable young of many species. We watched you treat all as worthy of protection. We watched you respond to need without first calculating political advantage. That was a military operation. We're just running a nursery. You showed us a principle. We applied it to a broader context. Rithal leaned forward. For generations, my people have believed that protecting our young required isolation. Trust no one. Defend alone. It made us strong, but it limited us. We could not build alliances because we could not overcome the instinct to see all others as threats. And now we have watched humans care for our young alongside the young of our traditional enemies. We have seen these younglings grow up together, learn together, play together. They do not hate each other because you do not teach them to hate. Rital Post. When news came of human children in danger, we did not calculate the political cost. We did not convene councils or debate proper procedure. We simply acted, because that is what you taught us. Young of any species deserve protection. Daniel sat back, trying to understand the implications. You coordinated with Vrals, with Drakners, species you've been fighting for centuries. We found common cause. Human children were in danger. Our own young are in your care. The young of all our species learn together in your facilities. This created a connection we did not expect. Rithal showed teeth in what might have been a smile. The Vrail commander and I have already exchanged insults over whose warriors performed better in the extraction. But we also exchanged tactical assessments for potential future cooperation. This would have been unthinkable before. More calls came in. Vrals, Drachners, Kelthans, every predator species that had participated in the rescue, all telling similar stories. They'd acted on instinct when human children were threatened. Only afterward did they realize they'd done something unprecedented. They'd worked together across ancient enemy lines, and it had felt right. The galactic reaction was predictable chaos. The Council demanded explanations. Prey species expressed concern about predator alliance. Some called it the beginning of a military coup. Others saw it as vigilantism run wild. Everyone agreed something fundamental had shifted in galactic politics. Daniel just saw it as parents protecting children. 2 weeks later, formal charges were dropped against the predator fleets. Too complicated to prosecute, the Council claimed. Too many jurisdictional questions. The pirates had been operating illegally anyway, and the hostages were safe. Better to move forward than dwell on procedural violations. But the real reason was simpler. Public opinion across the galaxy overwhelmingly supported what the predators had done, especially among species who had children in human facilities. When your child's playmate is in danger, old species rivalries matter less. The younglings at Station Harmony seemed to sense something had changed. They were more active, more confident. The Scaran hatchlings played rougher with the Vrail cubs, but nobody got seriously hurt. The Drachners taught the Kelthans hunting games. Species that had been cautiously coexisting were now actively collaborating. Daniel found Tar attempting to teach Shek a Scaran hunting technique. The Vrail cub was terrible at it, but trying hard. Tar was patient, demonstrating repeatedly. When Shek finally got it right, they both celebrated together. They're imitating what they saw, Amy observed. The adults worked together to rescue children. Now, the children want to work together too. Director Yin called a staff meeting. We're getting requests from 70 more species to open facilities. The Council is fast-tracking approval for expanded operations. They want to make this official. The Galactic Child Care Initiative sanctioned and funded. That's good, right? One of the caretakers asked. It's complicated. Some species see this as humans gaining too much influence. Others worry about predators becoming too coordinated. There's talk of restrictions, oversight committees, limiting which species can participate. Daniel shook his head. That misses the entire point. This works because it's simple. Children need care. We provide it. No politics. No agenda. Just basic decency. Try explaining that to the Council. They don't think in terms of basic decency. They think in terms of power balance and strategic advantage. Over the following days, Daniel watched political maneuvering attempt to turn childcare into diplomacy. Proposals for human-only facilities segregated by species. Suggestions for Council oversight on curriculum. Requirements for political vetting of parents before accepting younglings. Every proposal made it more complicated, more bureaucratic, less about the children and more about controlling the narrative. Then Captain Rithal returned to Station Harmony. With him came representatives from 40 predator species. They requested a meeting with Daniel. He met them in the largest conference room the station had. 40 of the galaxy's most dangerous beings, all focused on him. The Council attempts to regulate what we have built here, Rithal began. They seek to control it, to make it serve political purposes. We reject this. A Vrail commander stepped forward. My cubs have thrived under human care. They have learned things I could never teach them. I will not allow bureaucrats to destroy this for political advantage. One by one, the predators spoke, all saying the same thing. The facilities must continue as they were. No interference, no political oversight. Just humans doing what humans do best, caring for young who need care. You want us to refuse Council oversight? Daniel asked. We want you to continue exactly as you have been. We will handle the Council. Rithal's expression was fierce. They forget that we did not ask their permission to rescue human children. We will not ask their permission to ensure all children receive proper care. You defy the council over nursery regulations. We would defy the council over the principle that vulnerable young deserve protection without political complication. You taught us this principle. We will not allow it to be corrupted. Daniel looked around the room at beings who could each kill him without effort, who commanded fleets and armies, who shaped galactic policy through force when necessary. And they were here asking him to keep doing something simple, taking care of children. All right, he said, we'll keep doing what we're doing. You handle the politics. Rithal showed teeth. Gladly. The council never did implement their oversight proposals. It's hard to regulate something when 40 predator species make it clear they'll ignore any regulations that interfere. Instead, the council quietly expanded funding and looked the other way while humans continued running childcare facilities their own way. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. Children need care. Someone provides it. Everything else is just noise. 3 months after the Freehaven incident, Captain Rithal returned to Station Harmony. This time he came alone. No warriors, no warship. Just a small personal transport and a request to speak with Daniel. They met in the observation room overlooking the nursery. Rithal stood at the window for a long time, watching Tkar play with a mixed group of younglings. Scarin, Vrail, Drakner, and 3 other species Daniel couldn't immediately identify. They were building something together with blocks, arguing good-naturedly about design, compromising when conflict arose. I do not understand this, Rithal said finally. I watch and still I do not understand. What don't you understand? Why you do it? What you gain? The Scarin captain turned to face him. My species survived by being the strongest, the most aggressive, the most willing to do whatever necessary to protect our own. It is who we are. It is how we evolve. And it worked. You're still here. But we are alone. Every Scarin colony is isolated. Every family defends its own territory. We trust no one because trust is death. For millions of years, this kept us alive. Rithal gestured at the window. Then I see Car down there, playing with a Vrail, sharing with a Drakner. Happy in ways I have never seen a Scarin hatchling be happy. And I do not understand how this is possible. Daniel leaned against the window. What did your childhood look like? Training. Combat preparation from the moment I could walk. Learning to fight, to hunt, to kill. Learning that everything outside my family would kill me if given the chance. Learning to trust no one. Were you happy? Rithal was quiet for a moment. Happiness was not a consideration. Survival was all that mattered. And now you're a warrior. A successful one. You command a fleet. You've survived everything your culture prepared you for. Daniel pointed at Tar. But that hatchling down there will survive and have something you never had. Friend from other species. Understanding that the galaxy isn't just predator and prey. Knowledge that cooperation is another form of strength. This is what you teach them. We don't teach it. We just create the conditions where they can learn it themselves. Daniel pulled up some footage on his datapad. Look at this. From 2 weeks ago, the video showed a small Kelthan youngling trying to climb up to a toy on a high shelf. Too small to reach it. The youngling tried several times, failed, sat down looking defeated. Then Tkar wandered over, observed the problem, climbed up and knocked the toy down where the Kelthan could reach it. Tkar gains nothing from this, Rithal observed. The toy is not his. The Kelthan is not his kin. Why help? Because he could. Because the Kelthan needed help, and he was there to provide it. Daniel showed another clip. This is from yesterday. Tkar trying to work a puzzle that requires color matching. But Scarans are partially colorblind. He was getting frustrated. In the video, Shek the Vrail cub approached, watched Car struggle, then started pointing at the correct pieces. Working together, they solved the puzzle. Shek helped because Tar helps him, Rithal said. It is reciprocal, like an alliance. It's more than that. It's community. They help each other because they've learned that's what you do in a community. Not for immediate gain, not because of formal alliance, just because helping each other makes life better for everyone. Rithal returned his attention to the nursery. A human caretaker was settling a dispute between younglings. Nothing violent, just a disagreement about game rules. The caretaker listened to both sides, asked questions, helped them reach a compromise where both felt heard. Your people do this naturally, Rithal said. This caring for others. This building of community. How? Daniel thought about his answer carefully. Humans evolved as cooperative hunters. We weren't the biggest or strongest or fastest. We survived by working together. We raised our young communally because that's what worked. Over thousands of generations, we developed instincts for cooperation, for reading each other's needs, for building social bonds. But these are not your young. They are not even your species. Doesn't matter. Our instincts don't discriminate. When we see something vulnerable that needs care, we want to help it. It's just how we're built. Daniel smiled. My grandmother used to rescue injured birds when I was a child. Didn't matter what species. Didn't matter if they'd ever fly again. She just couldn't stand seeing something hurt and not try to help. This seems inefficient, maybe, but it also means we can build communities across species lines. We can see past immediate tribal loyalty to broader connections. That's not weakness. It's a different kind of strength. Rithal considered this. I need to request something of you. Something unusual. Go ahead. I want you to teach me, and others like me, warriors from predator species who need to understand this. He gestured at the nursery. We are sending our young here, and they're changing, becoming something we do not understand. We need to understand it too, or the gap between generations will be too great. You want childcare training. I want to learn what you know about caring for vulnerable beings, about building communities, about teaching cooperation instead of competition. Rithal looked uncomfortable. My people mock weakness. We see caring as a liability. But I have watched what happens when children learn differently. I have seen the results. And I want to learn your ways. Daniel stood straighter. This was unprecedented. A Scaran warrior asking to learn gentleness. It won't be easy. Your instincts will fight you every step. All worthwhile things are difficult. Over the following weeks, Daniel created a training program. Not just for Rithal, but for representatives from 15 predator species. Warriors and hunters who decided their young were learning something valuable and they needed to understand it. The first sessions were awkward. Daniel put Rithal in the nursery with a mixed group of younglings and told him to supervise playtime. Within 5 minutes, the Scaran captain had organized them into military drills. The younglings were confused and unhappy. This is what I know, Rithal said, frustrated. Structure, discipline, order through strength. They're 3 years old. They need play, not boot camp. Daniel demonstrated. Sat down with the younglings. Asked what they wanted to do. Listened to their ideas. Facilitated their game without dictating it. The younglings relaxed and went back to playing happily. You let them make their own choices. Within safe boundaries, yes. They need to learn to make decisions. To negotiate with each other. To handle minor conflicts themselves before adults intervene. That's how they develop social skills. Rithal tried again. This time he sat down with the younglings, but didn't immediately impose structure. He watched, observed. When a conflict arose over a toy, he waited. Let them try to work it out. Only stepped in when it became clear they needed help. Then he asked questions instead of giving orders. Why do you want that toy? How do you think your friend feels? What could you both do to solve this? The younglings worked it out themselves. Rithal looked amazed. They are capable of this already. They just needed space to try. Exactly. Most of what we do is create safe space for them to learn. We don't teach them everything. We guide them while they figure things out. The training continued. Daniel taught them about emotional regulation, about reading body language across species, about responding to needs instead of demands, about the difference between discipline and control, about building trust through consistency rather than fear. The predator warriors struggled. Every instinct told them to dominate, to establish hierarchy, to show strength. Learning to show vulnerability, to admit when they didn't know something, to ask for help instead of commanding it. All went against their nature, but they persisted because they saw the results in their young, because they wanted to be able to understand the children who would return to them, changed by human influence. One evening, Daniel found Rithal in the nursery after hours. The Scaran captain sat with Tar, who was having trouble sleeping. Rithal was humming. It was terrible, tuneless, but Tar was curled against him, content. I watched you do this, Rithal said quietly. Sing to calm them. I do not know your human songs. So I hum. He seems to accept it. You're doing great. I'm doing something my ancestors would consider shameful. Showing softness to a hatchling. But Tar needs this to sleep. And I find I do not care what my ancestors would think. That's growth. Tar fell asleep. Rithal carefully transferred him to his sand pit and adjusted the heating. Movements gentle despite clawed hands that could tear metal. My daughter will come here soon, Rithal said. I have decided. I want her to grow up the way Tar has. With friends across species lines. With understanding that the galaxy is more than violence. But I also want to be able to understand her when she returns to me. To speak her language of cooperation and community. You're learning it now. Slowly. With difficulty. But yes. Rithal looked at his hands, designed for killing, now used for comfort. You have weaponized something I thought was weakness. You have made caring into a force that changes species relationships, changes individuals, changes the entire galaxy's approach to child rearing and community building. We just take care of children. No, you take care of all children. That is the difference. That is the weapon. Rithal met his eyes, and we're learning to wield it too. The training program expanded. More predator species wanted to learn. Not just warriors, but parents, educators, community leaders. They came to Station Harmony to understand what their children were experiencing, to learn a different approach to raising young, to see if they could build communities like humans did. Some struggled more than others. Some never quite got it. But enough succeeded that change began spreading. Scaran colonies started implementing communal childcare. Vrail families began cooperating with neighbors. Drakner settlements experimented with mixed-species education, small changes. But in a galaxy where predator species have been isolated for millions of years, small changes mattered. Daniel watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He'd come to Station Harmony thinking he'd care for some alien children. He hadn't expected to trigger a cultural revolution among the galaxy's apex predators. But that's what happens when you show dangerous beings that gentleness is another form of strength. They learn. They adapt. They teach their own people. And the galaxy changes, one youngling at a time. 1 year after Captain Rithal first arrived with his battle fleet, Daniel stood on a Scaran world watching something impossible happen. Around him stretched a facility that mirrored Station Harmony's design, but adapted for Scaran environmental preferences. Inside, younglings from 7 species played together, while Scaran caretakers supervised with a gentleness their species had never shown before. Director Yoon joined him at the observation window. 47 facilities now. 17 run by humans, 30 run by predator species using our methods. The Galactic Council is calling it the fastest cultural shift in recorded history. They're still nervous about it. Of course they are. Predator species learning to cooperate crosses every political boundary they've spent centuries establishing. Prey species worry about coordinated predator action. The Council worries about losing control. She smiled. But none of them can argue with the results. The results were clear. Younglings raised in mixed facilities showed better social adaptation, lower aggression, higher problem-solving abilities. They maintained their species' strengths while gaining new capabilities for cross-species interaction. The first generation was still young, but the early indicators were remarkable. More importantly, it was spreading beyond just childcare. Adult predator species who'd learned human methods were applying them to other areas. Trade negotiations that once ended in violence now ended in compromise. Territorial disputes were being resolved through discussion instead of warfare. The galaxy wasn't becoming peaceful, but was becoming less reflexively violent. Daniel's communicator buzzed. Rithal requesting a meeting. They kept in contact over the year, the Scaran captain becoming something like a friend. Daniel headed to the facility's conference room that Rithal waited there with his daughter. She was small for a Scaran, maybe 4 years old, with scales that still carried a juvenile sheen. She stood close to her father, but watched Daniel with curious golden eyes that lacked the predatory edge adult Scarans carried. Daniel Reed, you remember my daughter, Shuri? Of course. Last time I saw you, you were barely walking. Daniel crouched to her level. You've grown. Shari chirped something in Scaran. Rital translativ. She says you're the one father talks about. The human who taught him to be gentle. Your father taught himself. I just showed him it was possible. She wants to attend the facility here, Rithal said. I have agreed, but I wanted you to meet her first, to understand why this matters to me. Daniel studied the youngling. She had her father's bearing, but something softer in her manner. Less of the constant alertness that adult Scarin showed. Tell me why it matters. Rithal settled into a chair built to accommodate his bulk. When I was her age, I knew only fear and aggression. Every moment was about survival, about proving I was strong enough to live. I knew nothing of friendship, of cooperation, of finding joy in anything beyond victory over enemies. That's the only childhood you knew. Yes, and it made me an excellent warrior, but it made me nothing else. I cannot create art. I cannot appreciate beauty. I cannot build relationships beyond tactical alliances. Everything is threat assessment and resource calculation. He looked at his daughter. I do not want that for her. Shari wandered over to the window and pressed her small, clawed hands against it. Outside, younglings played in the courtyard. She watched them with obvious longing. She will still be Scarin, Rithal continued. Still strong, still capable of defending herself. But she will also be more. She will understand cooperation. She will have friends across species. She will see the galaxy as something beyond battlegrounds and resource zones. The traditionalists in your culture must hate this. They do. They call me weak, corrupted by soft human values. They say I am betraying our species' nature. Rithal showed teeth. I tell them I'm expanding it. Strength without wisdom is just violence. Power without purpose is just destruction. We have been strong for millions of years. Perhaps it is time to learn to be wise as well. Daniel stood and walked to the window where Shari waited. What do you think? Do you want to learn with children from other species? Shari chirped rapidly. Rital translativ. She says she already has a friend. A Vrail cub named Pak who lives 3 territories away. They met during a trade delegation. They want to play together, but our people's traditions forbid it. Not anymore. At least not here. Shari's eyes brightened. She chirped again, this time at her father. Rital nadif. She asked if Pa can come here too, so they can finally play together properly. We'll make it happen. The youngling practically vibrated with excitement. Then she did something Daniel had never seen a Scarin do. She hugged her father, just wrapped her small arms around his leg and held on. Rithal looked startled, then carefully placed one clawed hand on her head. Gentle despite its deadly capability. She learned that from watching humans, he said quietly. Physical affection for comfort rather than combat is strange, but not unpleasant. Over the following months, Daniel watched the new generation grow. Children like Shari and Tar who knew from their earliest memories that other species could be friends, not just threats or resources. They played games that mixed different species traditions. They learned to communicate across language barriers. They solved problems together that their parents' generations would have fought over. The changes rippled outward. Young Scarans who'd grown up in mixed facilities were now becoming adults. They approached galactic society differently than their parents. More open to negotiation. More willing to seek peaceful solutions. More capable of building lasting alliances, the prey species noticed. Initial fear gave way to cautious hope. Maybe predators learning cooperation wasn't a threat. Maybe it was an opportunity for genuine peace. The Galactic Council remained divided. Some representatives saw the shift as positive. Others worried about losing traditional power structures. Debates raged about whether to expand the program or restrict it, whether to study it or suppress it, whether humans had given the galaxy a gift or a weapon. Daniel didn't much care about the politics. He cared about results. And the results were clear in every facility he visited. Younglings thriving, parents learning new skills, communities forming across ancient enemy lines. The galaxy wasn't becoming a utopia, but it was becoming more livable. He found himself back on Station Harmony for the first time in months. The place had expanded twice since he'd left. More sections, more species, more staff. Amy ran the day-to-day operations now, while Daniel traveled between facilities, training staff, and troubleshooting problems. In the original nursery where it all started, he found Carr. Nearly full-grown now, the young Scarin was helping care for new hatchlings, showing them the facility, teaching them the rules, introducing them to younglings from other species with a casual friendliness that still seemed impossible. "You've come far," Daniel said. Carr turned, golden eyes bright with recognition. "Daniel Reed, you are the one who cared for me when I was too small to understand why my parents left me. I remember. You were terrified. Wouldn't eat for 2 days. I thought they had abandoned me, left me to die among aliens." Carr gestured around the nursery. "I did not understand then what they were giving me. A chance to grow up differently than they did. To learn there was more to life than survival. Well, you do now. You're old enough to return to your people's territories. I am, but I have requested to stay here, to work as a caretaker like you did." Carr picked up a small drachner who'd wandered over. The youngling chirped happily and grabbed his scales. "Someone taught me that caring for vulnerable beings is strength, not weakness. I want to teach others the same." Daniel felt something tight in his chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. Your parents would be proud. They are. They visit often. They struggle to understand what I have become, but they try. That is enough. More younglings arrived for afternoon activities. Carr set the drachner down and began organizing them into play groups. His movements were efficient but gentle, firm but kind. He'd learned the balance between structure and freedom that made the facilities work. Director Yoon found Daniel in the observation room. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's important." The someone turned out to be a Kelphin elder, one of the most reclusive predator species. They'd only recently started sending their young to human facilities. The elder's scaled hide bore the marks of centuries of life, eyes that had seen the galaxy change. "Daniel Reed, you Ametikwa. I come representing the Kelphin Assembly. How can I help you? We have observed what you have built, what you have taught, how you have changed the galaxy's apex predators from isolated hunters to community builders." Tekvar settled into a chair. "We wish to understand your species better. What drives you to care for others young? What cultural foundation allows this behavior? It's not complicated. We see someone who needs help. We help them if we can. That's all. But you gain nothing from this. No territory, no resources, no tactical advantage. You invest tremendous effort caring for young who will never be your own. This seems contrary to evolutionary logic." Daniel thought about how to explain. Human evolution happened in groups. We survived by cooperating, by helping each other, by raising children communally. Over thousands of generations, we developed instincts that made us want to help others, especially the vulnerable. It became part of who we are. And now you apply these instincts across species? We just never learned to turn them off based on species boundaries. To us, a child is a child. Doesn't matter what species. If they need care, we want to provide it. Tekvar was silent for a long moment. "My species has existed for 60 million years. In all that time, we have trusted no one outside our immediate family groups. We have survived through absolute self-reliance. It has kept us alive, but it has also kept us isolated. We have no allies, no communities, no connections beyond blood ties. And now you want to change that. We watch the younglings who attend your facilities. They return home different, more adaptable, more capable of forming relationships, better equipped for a galaxy that is more complicated than tooth and claw." The elder leaned forward. "We wish to learn your methods, to transform our approach to raising young. But we do not know if it is possible. Can species like mine evolve for isolation, learn to build communities? I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But I think trying is worthwhile. Even if you only partially succeed, even if only some of your people embrace it, that's still progress. Then we will try. We will build facilities, send our young to learn, train our adults in your methods. We will see if 60 million years of isolation can be overcome by one generation's willingness to be different." As Tekvar left, Daniel returned to the observation window. Below, younglings from a dozen species played together, learning cooperation, building friendships, developing skills their parents never had. That he thought about the question he'd asked a year ago. Why did the galaxy's fiercest predators leave their young with humans? The answer was simpler than he'd realized. They saw in humans something they'd lost or never had: the ability to care beyond immediate family, the willingness to protect vulnerability rather than exploit it, the strength to be gentle when gentleness mattered. And they wanted their children to learn it too. The galaxy hadn't become peaceful. Violence still existed. Species still had conflicts. But now there was another option, another path. Children who grew up with friends across species lines became adults who tried negotiation before warfare. Parents who learned human methods taught their own communities different approaches. Change came slowly, one child at a time, one facility at a time, one former enemy learning to cooperate at a time. Daniel watched Carr comfort a crying hatchling, watched Shari and Pak play together despite their species' ancient rivalry, watched human caretakers move through the nursery with practiced compassion, treating every youngling as precious regardless of species. This was humanity's greatest weapon. Not technology or military might, not economic power or political influence. Just the simple, stubborn insistence that all children deserve care, protection, and a chance to grow up in a galaxy that offered more than just survival. The predators had killed for their young for millions of years. Now, they were learning there was